Good afternoon, wonderful people. Welcome to week 4. We are officially halfway through the unit or the term, shall I say. Where is time going? It is insane. Tonight is assignment 1, due date 11:59 if you have not submitted it already. I know some people have, so amazing news. Once you submitted it, you can wipe your hands clean and then focus on the next. You're halfway through. Hopefully you see the light at the end of the tunnel and you're feeling good. I also understand when you submit an assignment, you kind of feel a little bit, oh, I'm exhausted, a lot's going on. So hang in there, you're nearly towards the end. Positivity and good vibes out there. So just a little acknowledgement that I am on the beautiful Yugambeh country again today and pay my respects to elders past and present and any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present or watching the recording. Hopefully if you are on the Gold Coast, you've been able to get outside in this glorious 30-degree heat. If you're not and you're in Victoria, I'm sorry you're missing out on the heat. But hopefully everyone's been able to get outside today and get a bit of fresh breath air and mix it up a little bit because, sun does the world wonders. So I'm about to show you a clip. And it is Jessica Wimbus, who is the program coordinator for Library for All. She is a friend of mine and she is a guest presenter for this unit. I have done a recording of her speaking, so get comfortable. It's about a 13-minute recording. She goes into detail about Library for All, how you can use this resource in your classroom, and she gives you great advice around embedding Aboriginal perspectives. Another hint, hint, nudge, nudge, if this is something that does inspire you, maybe you can write towards it with assignment 2 as well. So hopefully the volume is working for you and I will press play.
Library for All has been around for 10 plus years and it originally started from the Haiti devastation, and the founder went over there with her family and realized they didn't have any education tools or resources like we have here and decided to create Library for All. So we create culturally relevant resources and book collection written in language over in those countries to help children have access to education. And in many of those countries, it is third world, so they don't have teachers with degrees. It's usually someone's aunt or uncle that's running an education program of some sort, usually under a tree or in a building. And we've essentially put together culturally relevant apps as well around literacy and numeracy. And they've put them, you can see the kids in this picture with little yellow tablets. So these little yellow tablets have our apps on them and it's free. So they can they're usually DFAT, which is Department of Foreign Fair and Trade. They usually buy these for those countries, and then these put to the communities, and the communities can pull these out essentially as a classroom in a kit. And it's got their whole library of collection of books, usually about 300 or 400 of books that's written by community, and we help them do that so that it's in their own language and it's culturally relevant. We have printed copies of our books, digital apps, and obviously the Spark kit, which you can see here with the tablets and the box. So from there, they went, hang on a minute, we're in all these different countries, which is amazing, but what are we doing for our First Nations people in Australia? So this is where our first Australian program, the Our Yarning program, started in November 2021. So it's guided by Library for All's program coordinator myself, and we also have a cultural facilitator as well, and a cultural advisory board to make sure the cultural integrity of our material is intact and followed through every process of what we do and how we do it. It's a free library, so you can download it. The last slide that I have on here, you can download the app for free and have access to over 400 books. As it's all our whole theory of culturally relevant resources in the education industry, there is lots of evidence-based research done by Dr. Lara Kane-Gray on our website. So if you go onto our website, you can read up around that and why it's important to have culturally inclusive materials in your classroom. which I think might be very beneficial after we've just had that discussion and I saw some of the questions that you have to answer. So based on that cultural inclusivity, that's where the collection kind of came about and why it's really important for us to make sure that our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students have that in the classroom. Keeping in mind that education system we have today is a very Western framework, and you're coming from a very different framework of the way in which their knowing, being and doing and the way their thinking works is very different. So they're having to assimilate again into a Western system, and there isn't much bridging. So the more resources and ways in which you embed Indigenous perspectives can come into your classroom in a really authentic way is really helpful for them. So we know, and as teachers that you are now becoming, that you know that oral language development is really important. So a lot of our collection is primary based to help that gap between 0 and 5, because a lot of our students come as EALD students, English as a second language or dialect, especially out in remote communities, and coming in and accessing a curriculum that you really need to have full standard Australian English to access. There's a bridging that gap kind of moment there. So our books are written in English for that reason, with cultural content that they can relate to engage them with that and try and help bridge that gap, because the more students that have books read to them, the more oral language and the more, I guess, development and pathways formed by the time they get to prep and have that better standing to kind of engage in our education system. So we have a bit of a goal. So over 5 years, we're in the year 4 this year to reach 500 books and reach 95,000 children and 50 communities. At the moment, we're at 278 original books and 406 on the app, with 19,000 people downloading the app itself. The app is actually set up, and the collection set up into 4 thematic themes. You have health and hygiene, sports, arts, recreation, science and environment, culture and communities. Now, from an education perspective, that makes it easy, because when you go onto the app, you're teaching a science unit, you can look up all the science books and use one of those as a stimulant. You're teaching a health unit, you can go in there and find that theme, and you kind of get the basis of how that would work. So that makes it really easy for you to navigate the app. We have mirror books and window books. So a mirror book is when a child reads a book that's directly from their mob, and it's mirroring back their identity back to them. But they might have a cousin that lives in Broome, so they then read a book from a mob in Broome, and that gives them a window book. But the beauty of the collection, it not only supports our Indigenous students, but it supports our non-Indigenous students, because a lot of the books that we do have can be quite stereotypical and aren't authentic views of Indigenous culture. So this way, those non-Indigenous students actually get an insight to authentic Indigenous culture and perspectives. So the perspectives of a lot of our books come from all across Australia. This gives you a little bit of an indication. So we've got some from the Torres Strait, and we're still working on expanding that. And it's also really hard to find Torres Strait books to teach with. So again, another resource that you can tap into here. A lot from Western Australia, Northern Territory and Queensland, and we're working on South Australia, Victoria and Tasmania at the moment. These are just some of the titles that you'll see in the collection. And a really wide perspective. So you're getting a lot of elders that are writing, a lot of different generations that are writing, and you can see some of the captured history moments, like you can see up here celebrating the centenary in 1977 on Torres Strait Island. So we're getting to get a lot of diverse perspectives, which is great for you guys to be able to teach with as well. We do have a non-fiction series around climate change and the Aboriginal approach to climate change and how it's affecting country on our series in the app as well. So this is kind of what our layout for a non-fiction text would look like, just to give you a bit of a vast difference from the non-fiction, the narratives. How our workshops, so how we kind of get a library for all, and we actually pride ourselves on being able to be invited into community, because that's also a really core part of working with Aboriginal communities and Torres Strait communities, is that you are invited and that you make that connection and that meaningful relationship, because we're all about relationships and connectedness. And as soon as that's established and you're able to both feel safe in the space to interact, then a lot of magic can happen. And from that, myself or sometimes we have other people that will come along with us to community. It's really important that I understand the community I'm going to and the individual history of that community and how that'll affect my visit and my time there, but also how I interact with the mob in that place, because there are a lot of history in Australia and a lot of it's very different, and each mob and each place you go to is like literally going to Europe and going over the border into another country. So I have to make sure that I understand the practices and the protocols of that space, and I'm aware of those as to not offend anybody. So we really take our cultural integrity really highly, and through the whole process, not just the workshops, but going through the whole process of editing a story, making sure that the illustrations best represent our people as much as possible, and the authors and the place that it's from. There is Indigenous eyes over that whole process every step of the way to make sure that it is authentic. So we've done some work with Doomadgee, if anyone's been up to Far North Queensland, and they actually they've translated some of their books and have those on country, and they don't leave country. Their English books are on our app and available to be read. They also have their Spark kit, which they have there as well, and use that in their after school program and in their mums and bubs group as well, to teach the mums how to read to their children. So we also have a partnership with Yallery, which has been really beneficial to let Year 12 students have the opportunity to become published authors by the time they finish Year 12, and introduce them to the publishing industry as well, but also make a contribution to the next generation with some amazing stories that have come out of that really relate to the next generation and make a difference. So that's been a really beautiful partnership that we've created. This is the Torres Strait, and going there and meeting the ladies from the Torres Strait, which is a completely different culture to my culture. And it was really wonderful to be able to go all the way up there and meet the community and have their beautiful stories shared with us to publish, so that their children can have books that they can see themselves in and have their identity in. These are some of the packs that we have on our website. They're available to purchase from schools or from anybody individually. You just put them in the cart on the website. We did theme them so that if you wanted to have a particular variation of books, there is a lot in the app, so it made it easier for people to kind of break it down. This might be something that you might want to add to your resource bucket and have a few of these to take on prac, and even in your classroom when you actually get your paid teaching position. We also have social and emotional learning books as well. These ones aren't Indigenous, however, it is based on the KSL framework. So a lot of the social emotional learning books that we have at the moment available to us are usually the ones we all see at Kmart with happy, sad, all of those emotions. This one actually has a narrative and a teaching tool that goes along with it. So really important to have a look at those as a teacher, I think, especially in that primary context, to have a look at what we've got and see if they're a resource that you would like to use. We also have artists in residence. So a lot of our illustrations, we've got about 5 people on board at the moment that are Indigenous illustrators, and then each year we have an artist in residence that get a mentorship in the publishing industry and get to work on their craft to further their career. At the moment we have Alicia, she's from Mount Isa, and she's the Kalkadoon Mob people, and she's been doing some wonderful work with our publishing team to illustrate some books at the moment. Here's some of the beautiful illustrations that you would see typically in our books that come through. And I wanted to capture those because they're very different to a lot of the books that you will see, and quite diverse, trying to capture different parts of culture and people, and understanding that you could walk past in the shop and not know you're walking past an Indigenous person because it's not very stereotypical. It's like a cup of tea. There's many variations, it's still tea. So understanding that in your classroom context is really important as well. Here is the part where you download the app, guys. Get your phone right up to the camera on the page and download it. There's one for Apple, there's one for Android. It's free. You will have access to 400 books. Go on there and have a look. This is your authentic way of embedding Indigenous perspectives without teaching culture. And kids are going to get that perspective of that author through the books. One of the things I also suggest, especially if you're in early childhood or you're in primary, is have an Aboriginal map up on your board in your classroom. And if you're reading these to your children, actually map and put a sticker or a dot on there where you're reading from, to educate the kids about how wide Australia is and where all these mobs are from and these authors are from. There's so many different wide perspectives of lessons that can come from these books. And I know that we have a lot of Western concepts that we need to teach, but they can all come from an Aboriginal perspective as well, because there's two ways of learning, and it's not just for our Aboriginal kids, it's also for our non-Indigenous kids, because I think we're at that point in the education system where we're making such an impact on our classroom that we want the next generation it to be a normal thing to do an acknowledgement of country, not question it. It would be a normal thing for them to know knowledge about country that they live on, for them to know the Indigenous people in their area and be connected to community. It's not just for Indigenous mobs. So I really would, if you take anything from that, it would be that, and be well connected with the community around you and use these books to help you teach and embed Indigenous perspectives. Library for All has been around for
What
10.
I love about this website, I try and show you so many resources that are for free. Use them, take them, put them on your web browser, put them on your, if you've got an iPad, anything, because whenever you are teaching, you go, hey, I've got this toolkit I can always pull from. And it's so important as teachers, because sometimes it is overwhelming thinking about how many free resources are out there, but do save them as you go along, because they're very, very helpful. So I am going to now unpack assignment 2. I'm going to show you what our learning support advisors here at Southern Cross University has put together for this assignment. So assignment 2 is reflective writing, and we have here the structure of a reflective writing in general. Now, I've popped here in general because it doesn't have to flow like this, but it is going to flow similarly like this for your writing. So you will have your introduction. This is where you're identifying and introducing your experience or your learning, or your answer, starting to unpack that question. You're highlighting what is important or outlining those key themes. Then in your main body, you're going to explore, you're going to analyze and synthesize and unpack your reflective prompts. And then your conclusion is where you're restating your learning and maybe perhaps planning for the future, depending on what your question is. What I like about this is the learning support team have unpacked a structure response. Now, it does not have to flow like this. It could be done multiple different ways, but this is just an idea to help you unpack it. So what they've done is question 1 is, how has your understanding of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories, cultures, and languages evolved throughout this unit? They have linked this question to the rubric. I always say make sure you're looking at the rubric when you are writing, because as markers, that's what they're looking at. So the first one, your introductory sentence to introduce your question and show your initial understanding. And they've shown exactly where it's linked to on the rubric. It's going to be at that very beginning. Again, you can unpack this any way you want. This is just one suggested way. Your body section is going to include specific examples, such as readings that have impacted your understanding. And we're showing you where this is linked to on the rubric. Again, down here, don't forget to add your literature to back up anything that you are stating, because it does say 3 to 6 scholarly resources in your writing. And then lastly, concluding section that discusses how new knowledge influences your approach and link new knowledge to future approach. Just showing you again whereabouts this is unpacked in the rubric and how you can possibly lay it out. Sometimes it helps really wrapping your head around the question. Again, it is personal and it is a reflection. So whatever you feel comfortable in writing to address those questions. Question number 2, what are the key elements of successful community engagement with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, and how can you implement these in your teaching practice? Now, this one's a little bit different again, a different way you can do, again, just a suggestion. Your introductory sentence can introduce the importance of building relationships in the community. Your body can discuss strategies for effective communication and how these relationships enhance your teaching and support. Again, backing this up with literature and then providing us with a concluding sentence because these are roughly only 500 words. So short sentence for concluding and your introduction. Again, it is completely up to you of what you feel comfortable and how you're responding because it is your own self-reflection. Question number 3, how can educators foster a sense of belonging and identity for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students in the classroom? Again, unpacking where it relates to the rubric. Introductory sentence to introduce your question and reflect on the importance of belonging and identity. Your body section is going to be unpacking 2 things within that rubric. Discuss strategies to create an inclusive classroom and linking these to the impact of these strategies on student engagement. This is where it's saying linking these positive impacts. Don't forget that word positive. And then your concluding sentence. Again, making sure you're backing this up with literature as well. Now, when you are doing your reflective writing, I think these are fantastic linking devices to help you start writing. Now, when you are writing, obviously it is a reflection. You can write in first person, but it is quite easy to, when you're writing for me or how it's very easy to leave academic writing and then move to a casual tone. So you have to be really careful not to go to this casual conversation because it still is an academic writing assignment. So this is to try and help you keep on that academic writing criteria. So for me, the most, and they've given you ideas, the meaningful aspects or elements was, and then they're telling you how you can link it. So this is really important as you write, making sure you really maintain that academic writing tone, even when you are using I or me. Definitely refer back to these linking devices if you feel you are losing a bit of way while you write. So this is an example when writing. I know some people in the past have struggled with this and it's totally fine. But when you, sorry, my light's crashing out here. Just have to wave it back on. Get a bit of the arms pumping a bit of blood flowing. So when you are writing and using literature, you're going to unpack your main idea. Then you need to introduce your literature. And this is where they've pointed it out. You introduce it by either, according to Smith 2020, you introduce the information that person is talking about. But the main thing people forget is then unpacking the information. So this is that next section. So you're telling me what Smith's talking about in his article, but then the next bit people are forgetting to then say, well, the point of this is, and you're going to explain in your own words, why have you included this literature or this scholarly literature? What's important about this? How are you unpacking what's being said? So it's really important that you are following on from that and not just throwing in a literature source and not unpacking it. Another example as well here, so your main idea, you're giving me your scholarly literature, again, Jones 2022, and then unpacking the information. Now, be careful with the verbiage you are using. So if you said Jones 2022 says that effective time, blah, blah, blah. We've crossed out says. We want you to use different verbiage such as Jones 2022 discusses. Jones 2022 states that. So you're using better verbiage. So just make sure you keep an eye on that because it can be quite tricky when you are trying to mix in your scholarly literature. Again, when you are using your scholarly literature, a lot of the some of the resources that I've shown throughout the unit is some articles that you can use. You can always use Google Scholar or you can always use Southern Cross University Library online and look for articles. You can also use a mix of grey literature. So that's where you're using your government websites, you're the Department of Education, prominent businesses. You're not using your Wikipedia. And then again, additional resources that have been supplied from the learning support team here at Southern Cross University, just some articles or quick guides or websites to help you write reflective writing. It never hurts just to have a quick look before you start writing and you're feeling a little bit confused with it. So this week's module was all about building relationships and connecting with community, which is going to help with one of your reflective writing. It's unpacking why it's important to build on relationships within your classroom, learning best support systems in your classroom. And again, it's going to help with your reflection question. So again, reflection is the process of you analyzing your own experiences and your responses to then gain a deeper insight and understanding. It does involve that thinking deeply about what you have learnt and how it applies to your personal and professional life as a teacher. I have just popped here some features of your language writing. So again, you can write in first person, just make sure you're sticking to that academic writing tone. Again, you can reference theories, and when you can write that in third person, refer to the author's name. Your verbs, again, when you're reflecting on that, and then opinions. So assignment 2 is due Sunday the 7th of December. Again, 50%, 500 words per question, 10% over, 10% under for the whole word count. And again, Gen AI, please be careful, especially with assignments rolling in, that you are not using Gen AI to help with prompts. It's only for editing. It is very obvious when people are using Gen AI. So please, please, please be smart about it. This is a reflection. So it's about your experiences within this unit and your reflection as a teacher as well. So your 3 questions for the assignment. I have popped bullet points underneath to help you guide in writing these questions. Again, look at these questions, but then look at the rubric to help you write your assignment. So that first one is talking about how has your understanding evolved through this unit of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories. You're reflecting on that initial knowledge where you began at the very beginning. Everyone's on a long line, so you're going to be coming from all different types of experiences and understandings. I want you to discuss specific activities or readings that have happened over the 6 weeks. It could be any of the activities that are done in the workshop, activities in the tutorial, any readings that have been popped up within the slides. So please make sure you have a look. Anything within the modules that have impacted your understanding. And then consider how this new knowledge influences your approach to teaching Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students in your classroom or your future classroom. Number 2 is those key elements of successful community engagement. So you're going to be reflecting on the importance of building relationships in the context of your local culture and country. So you may bring up local community that you know around you, local businesses that you know. It's a real deep reflection. Identify strategies for effective community engagement and collaboration, and discuss how these relationships and local culture can enhance your teaching and support student learning. And then lastly, this is a real large loaded question, but how can educators foster a sense of belonging and identity for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students in your classroom? This is when you're looking at the importance of belonging and identity for well-being and academic success. Discuss strategies to create that inclusive classroom environment and consider the impact of these strategies on student engagement. Now, one of the readings in this unit has a whole chapter around sense of belonging and identity for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. So definitely have a look at that. Now, through the next 3 weeks, we're going to be unpacking certain strategies, information that hits each question. So you're not going to be stranded and alone when you are completing this. So when you are using this, again, AI can't, but really try yourself and reflect deeply on each question in your learning experience. Make sure you're using 3 to 6 scholarly references for each question. You are using that 500 word count and APA 7th referencing. So please make sure APA 7th, not any other referencing style. So that first question, again, I've given you some things to think about. That first one is thinking at the beginning of the unit. You may want to jot notes down of where your head was at when you first started this unit, perhaps your experiences that led you to where you are now. Some examples, I've just popped a brief sentence to kind of get your brain ticking about if at the start of the unit I had limited knowledge. My understanding was mostly based on general information. Again, some people could come in and tell me their amazing experiences that they've had so far. Again, everyone's going to be on a different timeline. Identify specific activities. So tell me what's really significantly impacted your understanding. In this example, it's talking about how exploring the diverse languages using the IATSIS map, and then what that has done and what that has highlighted. Consider how new knowledge you have gained will influence your approach to teaching. So another example is this new understanding has made me more aware of the importance of incorporating Indigenous perspectives into my teaching. I plan to include more culturally relevant materials. You may even be more specific again. And then supporting with your scholarly references. Again, according to Smith 2020, telling me a statement and unpacking that. The next one is around that community engagement. Again, what's important is the context of your local culture and country of where you are at. So building relationships with Indigenous communities is crucial for fostering mutual respect and understanding. In this instance, I would be speaking about what local country I am on. If I was building relationships within Yugambeh community, it is crucial to ... Identify and discuss strategies for engaging and collaborating with community. So that's where you're looking at involving community members in your planning, in your delivery, in your programs, making sure that it's cultural relevance, you're gaining respect. Participating in community events, where are you going to build trust and rapport? You may bring up something that's local to the place that you are at. Speaking about that regular communication with community and with family members, having that ongoing dialogue, open communication. Again, we're going to be unpacking this in greater detail. This is where you are talking about your teaching practice, looking at if you're going to use local Indigenous knowledge into your curriculum, what's it going to enhance for your students? How's it going to support them? And again, reference, reference, reference. Belonging and identity in the classroom, your last question. So reflecting on that belonging and identity. I know that's such a loaded question, but if you do look this up, because I've been doing so much research around identity for Indigenous people, there is so many resources or articles out there, and a lot of authors doing a lot of studies around this. So definitely go into Google Scholar, go into Southern Cross University and type in belonging and identity for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. You are going to get so much information. So it's not hard to find scholarly literature for this. Talking about why it's fundamental for student well-being and academic success. I always say if the well-being is not priority, then academics going to fall behind. What's it going to do? Create that sense of belonging. They're going to perform better academically. They're going to have their self-esteem and confidence glow. Again, that's that whole chapter in that readings list. Propose multiple reasons strategies to create inclusive classroom environment. This is where you may be pulling on government documents like the Department of Education in New South Wales, in Queensland, in Victoria. There is lots of different frameworks you can use. Discuss how these strategies are going to positively impact student engagement and outcomes. And again, use references. Now, I've popped some links here just to think about. So if you are considering any educational frameworks, this one here is supporting inclusive education. And this is from the Department of Education, New South Wales. How to be inclusive for all students, different types of resources that you can unpack. Again, this is your grey literature that you can also reference. What role does it play in shaping identity? If you're linking it to any of your curriculums, again, Australian curriculum, or if you're in New South Wales, you're more than welcome to use that as well. So this is pulled, this is a case study. This is on one of the modules as well. And this talks about Robin Gooley's personal journey. And I think this really relates to our assignment and how you'll be writing. But she talks about her reflecting how and where she started when having experience in contact with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. She talks about the implications for her. And that she had limited knowledge and understanding of Australia's history, no insight or understanding of Indigenous language, no knowledge and understanding of the significance of local history. So I keep always talking about refer back to your community and where you are. Little or no understanding of Indigenous protocols. And then she speaks about her experience at this school and what's really important for her as an educator. And she speaks about making sure that there's shared responsibilities, including an Indigenous teacher and aide from community into your teaching practice. She gives advice as well. Now, this is from this little booklet here, 74 pages, embedding Aboriginal perspectives, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives in schools. Just going to pop that in the link anyway for you guys. Nice and easy access. And she goes on to explain what she did in her journey. She used this specific framework to help guide her. So she put this together, embedding Indigenous perspectives. What did she look at? Understanding Indigenous protocols, understanding language, understanding her students and their community, looking at assessments, planning and developing curriculum materials, professional and personal accountabilities, which is what all last week's module was about, unpacking yourself, your unconscious biases. What can you do to better your teaching pedagogy? Developing strong community partnerships, awareness of your organizational environment, understanding Indigenous knowledge frameworks. This is a great bounce springboard for you as well for writing about engaging community. Are you doing any of these in your practice? Another one here, again, this can help you within your assignment. This speaks about understanding Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander protocols. It breaks down information about what some basic protocols can be, how to form relationships within your community for best practice. Another one here, this is from the ATSL website. Again, linking it to your professional standards. How can I successfully communicate and engage with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander parents and carers? Now, this is great literature you can refer to. All the things we always speak about, making sure you're involving families, you have that open door policy, open communication, positive learning experience. And then it links you to the teacher professional standards. Now, when you are in New South Wales, you have to write to these standards of how you are doing this in your classroom practice when you do want to move up the ladder from being a graduate to a proficient teacher. So this is really important to look at your standards as well. Your Koori cultural inclusion. Again, I like to source things from different states. This is a Victorian one about Koori cultural inclusion. It speaks about in a school with positive climate, students are connected and engaged with their learning. Inclusive schools are where all students feel safe and valued and their diverse backgrounds are respected. And it speaks about what can you do in your classroom practice. I did grab it up. Where is it? So here it talks about what you can do, setting expectations and promoting inclusion. Again, this also creates that sense of belonging and well-being. Having high expectations for every student, that creates and develops positive relationships within your classroom, and they unpack that. For Koori students, high expectations empower learners to accept and challenge and extend themselves. Hint, hint, things to look at when you are writing about that identity and well-being in the classroom. They give you some really great advice, resources, and tools. Another one from Victoria is the culturally safe environment guidelines and what you can do in your classroom. Benefits of cultural safety, understanding identity, respecting culture, actions schools can take that you can incorporate in your own classroom environment. You may also want to look at some standards as well or frameworks to support this and back up what you're saying. Again, student and wellbeing engagement policies. It is your responsibility to deep dive into these links and deep dive into these websites because you will be using this in your own teacher practice in the future. I am going to play this short little video, and it's Denise speaking about empowering Indigenous children's sense of belonging, being, and becoming.
One day I was walking past a council office and a lady called out to me, would you like to do a kindergarten course in Brisbane? I did the kindercraft course 1984, 1985, and then I applied for a job at Yarra State School as a preschool kindergarten teacher, and I have not looked back since. I live in this beautiful country that belongs to the Kunganji people of Yarrabah. I now work as part of a team. We deliver remote Indigenous professional development workshops across Queensland, and we also have a mentoring program where we mentor early childhood educators who are, I guess, at their entry level. Yeah, it's such a pleasure, you know, working with these assistants because what we would like for them is giving them confidence in celebrating their own culture and embedding that when working with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and their families. The Foundations for Success acknowledges the children's cultural backgrounds, and it recognises that these children have different languages, and it has strategies in helping you support children whose language is not English. It's important that you do develop that sense of belonging with their children and the families, because for them it's that developing confidence and resilience and self-esteem. How you do that is, you know, the simple everyday human things. When they come inside to your service, you know, say hello. How are you? How's your day been? And encouraging them to stay with their child once they've settled them in, put their bags away, encourage them to sit down with their child and support them doing a drawing or whatever it is that you're doing in the morning. The environment is new, so it's important that you develop that sense of belonging for those children so that they feel comfortable and confident in coming to your service every day. That sense of being, just giving children more time to explore, more time to manipulate, more time to experiment. I have a timetable in my pre-prep room, but I don't stick to it. It's a general guide. If I look around the room and if I see children happily playing, that's what I mean about that sense of being. Just leave them to complete their learning experiences. That sense of becoming, it's because you've given up some of your time to allow children to explore, to experiment, to manipulate objects, and they start to become good at learning concepts, good at listening, because you've given them time to practice that skill, and of course becoming more confident and ready to enter the school the next year. Without Foundations for Success, you just don't have that guiding documents to help you plan for that. You can see the difference between when they first rocked up to our early childhood service until it's time for them to leave, and you go, where did that time go? But I've got no doubt that our children are in safe, good hands, knowing that they're going to grow up learning in Western ways and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander ways and keeping their culture strong. I've got no doubt.
And that's an interesting, the Western ways and Indigenous ways. And that is a really good article out there by Nakada that speaks about that cultural interface where all Indigenous people sit, where Western ways and Indigenous ways can go hand in hand and you can work within that space. If you are interested, I definitely recommend doing some deep diving into that as well. So, questions to help you. I will just quickly bounce back before I lose it in the chat. Callum, you can reference an Indigenous Aboriginal elder in your writing, but I also would advise as well as using any literature or department documents as well. But you can absolutely use an elder, a conversation or communication that you have both had. That's totally fine. Ella, I know you had a question. How can I help you?
It's all good. You answered it. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. Any other questions? I know I've kind of just deep dived straight into assignment 2, but I know it's better to get the ball rolling and at least we bring it up to know it's coming soon in a few weeks. But take some time to really settle on what we just went through. We will definitely unpack this in tutorials. Don't feel overwhelmed. It is your personal reflection. Yeah, anything that I can help with. If not, have a fantastic evening and enjoy the tutorial if you are going to it next. If not, I will see everyone next week at the workshop. Thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate you all coming. Enjoy your evening.